I'm Katie.
I'm Vinny, and this is Learn Real Good.
We're back.
We're back.
Better than ever.
Never been better. What was that?
There are new pyrotechnics.
Whoa.
Our budget has gone through the roof.
Nothing but fireworks in this podcast. A great use of funds.
When I think of raising funds, I immediately think of the PBS telethons.
Oh, yeah, totally. I wanted a tote bag so badly.
I always hated them because they'd always bring out like the best stuff, and they'd have these marathons of shows, and they'd intersperse it with telethons. Which, as a kid, I wasn't about to call into a telethon.
But if you're running a telethon, that's the way to do it.
Oh, for sure.
You gotta bring out the big guns. Faulty Towers.
Yes.
The Red Green Show.
On PBS?
Oh yeah, totally.
Was it?
Yeah.
I can't see now that I'm talking about loving the PBS telethon shows.
Well, what did you watch?
Well, I think they're Nova specials.
Oh, right.
Of course.
Yeah.
Typical biologist.
Nice.
I was into the Nova specials.
You watch Nova and I watch the comedy, and that's why we make this podcast.
Between the two of us,
Yeah.
we have all things covered.
Correct.
I remember in particular there was and I've told you this story. I don't think I've said it on the podcast. There was a dinosaur Nova special that I was obsessed with. And we had it taped, but I believe we taped it during a telethon. So, when I'd be watching it on the VCR, I'd skip the telethon bits.
You'd skip the telethon bits. That's shocking.
To get to the sweet dinosaur info.
Now, what was so great about this special? That's the real question.
I don't know, but it was like sort of these modern quote unquote science shows that bring in some like not science.
Okay.
For example, I don't remember
Yes.
a ton about this aside from loving it and watching it a lot. Number one, I remember my older brother, who also loved this show, went to the bathroom at some point during a watch and said specifically, "Katie, do not press the red button," which is of course record. I know this sounds like a Ren and Stimpy scene.
Yes. Will Katie push the red button? The big shiny button is calling her.
And let me tell you, I definitely did. And so from thenceforth, for the 2 minutes my brother was gone, there'd be 2 minutes in the middle of the show it was like a credit scene during a cartoon, I remember.
Wow.
He was not pleased.
No.
And ironically, if he just said nothing, I never would have pressed it.
Really, it's his fault. It's not your fault for pushing it at all. It's
That's
entirely
definitely my
the
fault.
person who just suggested it to you.
The other thing I remember from this movie is that at some point they show a model, like a plastic model of what
Okay.
they expect a dinosaur-human hybrid would have looked like.
Because that's normal.
But I don't know why they thought this thing would exist. But that's what I mean by this like science fiction
And
element.
what did it look like?
It was humanoid but reptilian.
Oh, okay.
And this is embarrassing,
Yeah.
but I get vulnerable in this show. I remember as a kid saying, "I'm going to marry the dinosaur man."
You're gonna marry the dinosaur human hybrid.
Yeah.
Did you know it wasn't real? But you're like, no, this is my goal.
I don't know. I think I felt like sympathy, like Elephant Man sympathy for him. Like no one
else could love this dinosaur human, but I will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was special.
He was one of a kind.
Anyway, this isn't a show about dinosaur men.
No, not yet. One day.
This is Learn Real Good, a science comedy podcast where we shoot the breeze, check.
And we share science facts.
Yes, that's next.
But we also have a guest.
Of course,
which
that's going to be the highlight, and I'm very excited about our guest this week.
Yes.
But we're not there yet. We're up to the second phase 2.
Science facts.
Yes. Who goes first? I don't keep track of these things.
You can go first.
Man, I'm so excited.
All right.
So this is a science fact I've been dying to share with you
You've been sitting
personally.
on this. You've mentioned it to me.
But now this is our life. If I find out something interesting, I have to save it for the pod.
Correct. Save it for the cast.
Vinny.
Katie.
I think you're aware, I know you're aware, that some people are lactose intolerant.
I am aware.
And if someone is lactose intolerant, it largely means that if they consume lactose, the sugar found in milk, the primary sugar found in milk, they get gastrointestinal distress, largely in like toots, but can also be things like diarrhea. You're aware of all this.
I wish I didn't, but I do.
So do you know why? Why are some people lactose intolerant and others not? Do you have any idea?
Why are some people lactose intolerant? Well, I guess is something in your body, like it's part of your biome, your gut biome, that can or can't break down that sugar.
Interesting.
And if it can, then you get gas, and if it can't, it's inert.
Well,
that's my guess.
Yeah. Okay. So it largely comes from a human gene.
Okay.
And what's interesting is people often assume that if you can't digest lactose, you're the mutant. There's something wrong with your genes. You can't do this.
Okay.
Right. But it's actually the other way around.
Okay.
It's a change to the gene that allows you to continue to digest lactose past weaning. So most humans, as you might not be surprised, because you need milk, right? Mother's milk to survive till 1-ish years old.
Sure. Some milk of some kind. Sure.
We digest lactose no problem. The thing is, most people turn off that gene. That's the normal thing.
Okay.
And not turning it off, what we call lactase persistence, past weaning, that's the weird thing. That's the change.
Interesting.
And so that's been dominant mostly in countries where we have a long history of farming things that make milk, cattle and goats and sheep, mostly cattle.
So hang on, let me see if I've got this.
Yes.
So when you're a baby, you are able to break it down.
Yes.
Because that's what you're eating.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're drinking
Well,
your
that's
mother's
not
milk.
why, but yes.
Yeah, but you're capable of doing it.
You need to,
You
or
need
else
to.
you'd probably die. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be really uncomfortable for the baby. And then when you're weaned, you stop. And so, like, the normal process is that you can no longer break down the lactose.
Correct.
Presumably because you no longer need it. You're
Correct.
just eating grains and meats and
Exactly.
whatever. But in milk-producing countries, because they keep drinking milk, they don't turn it off.
Well, that's great that you said that. So for a long time, we thought it was that. That was the driving
That's what you just
factor.
told me.
Hey,
I'm only going on what you tell me.
hang on to the story.
Okay.
For a long time, we thought, okay, these countries that have been farming cows for 10,000 years,
Yeah.
because we were eating all this milk,
Yeah.
that was the driver to make use of this energy
Yes.
to not be uncomfortable, and therefore you would have more energy, you'd have more babies, and pass on this lactase persistence gene. That's what we thought. That was the
That's
story
what
we
I
told.
thought for sure, because you just told me.
Well,
What?
a new paper
No.
from Nature,
Nature.
including hundreds of people from scientists and anthropologists and all these cool fields, did this incredible project where they
Okay.
went through like archaeological finds from
Yes.
10,000 years ago, pots scraping the inside
Oh,
to get
no.
milk residues.
Wow.
Combining that with what we found from skeletons
Skeletons.
to get more evidence.
This has everything.
And the thing is, people in Europe were drinking milk as adults for thousands of years before this gene develops.
Really?
Yes. So beyond that, so it wasn't so quick as we thought.
Okay.
So people were going through the diarrhea and the gas
They
for
loved
thousands
milk.
of years and
They
kept
loved
drinking
milk.
the milk. Now, here's another cool thing they find. This news
Okay.
story, evidence for this news story, that what is the driving force behind the evolution and
this
the rise
gene.
of this gene is actually not that it's great to break down milk because it gives us energy.
Yeah.
But in periods of famine, if you didn't have this gene, you were really screwed.
Because you didn't have any source of food.
No, more because when you're stressed, so think about famine. Oh, I'm so hungry. I'm so hungry. Oh,
That's
I'm still
generally what it
drinking-"
sounds like, yeah.
That's me in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm still drinking milk with the farts and the poops. I can't stop drinking this milk.
Right.
But now you're so low in energy.
Yeah.
You're so stressed from other things. Having diarrhea isn't just uncomfortable. It'll kill you.
Oh, it's fatal.
Yeah.
Wow. So if you could not break down that milk, you would die during times of famine.
Right. So there's these bursts, these periods where times were really hard, that there's huge die-offs of these people
Wow.
that could not digest the milk.
Shocking.
Yeah.
So basically you get culled during famine if you can't drink milk. That's wild.
That's what the evidence suggests. I
So
mean,
it's
this is just
not-
the beginning of this news story.
So it's not that it's an advantage to being able to have the milk. It's that it's a disadvantage to
Correct.
not being able to.
Correct.
That's a subtle distinction, but an important one.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a really cool fact.
I know, right?
Very
That's
cool,
that's what I
Katie.
got.
You dropped a hot fact on me.
Hot fact.
Hot milk facts.
That was the stamp, certified hot.
Certified hot.
Hot milk.
The Hot 100 milk facts.
Vinny.
All right,
bring
I've
it
got
to
a
me.
fact for you.
Let's hear
All
it.
right. Well, Katie, you know what a leap year is, I'm assuming.
Oh, boy.
Yeah,
I do.
You do. So,
I always wished I was one of those people born on February 29th
really?
on a leap year, so I could say, like, I'm only 4.
Right, yeah. Because that's how that works.
I don't know. I always wanted to be different, like marrying dinosaur men, being born on a
You
leap
really,
year.
yeah. You really want to go out on that limb.
Yeah, go
All right.
on.
So a leap year, we have it. We add one every 4 years because the year isn't exactly 365 days.
Right.
All right. So it's 365 days and a quarter. We add one every 4 years.
Sure.
It all adds up. Do you know what a leap second is?
It's because it's not exactly a quarter year that we're off by, right? So we also have to add and subtract these additional denominations. Is that not what you're referring to? Down to seconds.
No,
Okay.
second doesn't...
Tell me what it is, and then I'll say it, and then I'll edit it in.
Great, perfect.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
It's what?
So because the Earth's rotation is
Right.
roughly 24 hours. It's not quite 24 hours, but it also changes from over time. So that period is not exactly 24 hours.
Right.
So we started measuring time with like atomic clocks. Like you count up the number of vibrations in an atom, and you go, okay, this many vibrations is 1 second, and it doesn't care about the position of the Earth. Right, so it's just this atomic clock that's ticking away, and we say, okay, this many oscillations is a 24-hour period. But as the Earth slows, we want the Earth to be back in the same position every 24 hours, so that the sun is at its peak at noon, and like the sun sets during the at the right time of day. But if we let it go on and on, like there's a offset that happens, so it'll slow down every so often. So the Earth has been slowing down since we got really, really precise measurements, and that's just a astronomical feature. The Earth-Moon system, the Earth is slowing down on its rotation generally.
Okay.
However, something recently has changed.
Oh.
The Earth started speeding up.
Stop it.
And so recently, up until this point, to slow it, because it was slowing down, our clocks would be off. So they would add a second to kind of like, okay, so instead of 24 hours and 1 second, we're just going to, and have our clocks be off, we're just going to add an extra second.
Right.
So normally the clock would go 57, 58, 59, 00. Okay. During leap second, it goes 58, 59, 60, 00. You add an extra second.
Yeah.
But now things are slowing down. So recently we had a day that was 1.6 milliseconds slower.
I thought you said it was speeding up.
It was faster. I'm sorry. We lost 1.6 milliseconds. So it sped up 1.6 milliseconds. Okay. If it continues like this, that's really bad. Like all our transactions could be off by a second. Everything, the sun will be off by a second. But the main problem is GPS.
Oh.
It's so precise. The clocks that are in GPS, those satellites, are very, very precise. And so if you are off by 1.6 milliseconds, that actually translates to 10 centimeters on the Earth's equator of position error. And we can't have that. Cannot have that kind of
I won't arrive at my Airbnb. I'm going to arrive next door.
Yeah, you'll be at the wrong address. But it can accumulate like that. Like 10 centimeters doesn't sound like a lot. But that's over the course of a few days. It can build up so that you're off by a meter. 10. So you have to correct for this time discrepancy.
What are you going to do about this, Vinny?
So it's actually kind of a problem. How do you correct this? So normally when you add a second, it's not that bad. 58, 59, 60, 00. What do you do when you have to take away a second? Do you go 58 and then 00, 56, 57, 58? You skip the 59, then 00? Do you have a double set? Like, do you have like some other thing happening? Like how do you...
I don't know. Are you looking at me for answers? How do you remove a
second? How do you add a... Like, it's just wild. So they actually have to come up with a solution for this adding a what they call a drop second. How do you drop a second?
A drop second.
Yeah.
Wow. It's more of an issue to lose a second and add a second
because
for
we
some
never
reason?
planned for it in our time system.
Oh boy!
It was assumed that because the Earth is generally on a astronomical scale always slowing down, we'd always have to keep adding. So we have a system in place for adding seconds, but because it's an international like kind of system, you have to get all of the scientists and all think of all of this situations. Like there's like a time council.
Oh boy!
And they have to figure out how to do it, and they haven't done it yet.
I can't wait for the HBO miniseries based on this decision.
Time council. What do we do about the drop second?
11 men and 1 woman decide what to do about time.
You're optimistic that there'll be 1 woman on that council.
So, pardon my stupidity.
Yes.
As always. But why is it hard? Why can't you just go 59? 1?
Because that might cause all the computer programs haven't been written to compensate for that.
Oh, I see. But they have been for 60 0?
Yes, exactly. So it's kind of
millennium.
like Y2K.
It's a
right?
Y2K
it's
problem.
It's a Y2K problem. All of the programming, the GPS systems, all of those satellites, they have to be updated. How do you coordinate all of this?
Well, here's hoping all those Y2K scientists who've been sitting around for 22 years bored.
Yeah.
Now they've got a new Rubik's Cube to play with. Am I right?
That's right. Yeah, they got a new toy. So yeah, how do we deal with the Earth slowing? It'll slow back. The Earth speeding up. It will slow down eventually. So we will have to add leap seconds. But it's fascinating, and there's no like predictability. We don't really have a system to say, oh, we will need to. because we can predict eclipses, right?
Sure.
We know when they're going to happen to very high precision,
Yeah.
but we don't know when we're going to need leap seconds, and we don't know when we're going to need drop seconds. It's so chaotic.
This isn't a new problem, though, is it? So it'll be fine.
It will be fine.
Is it new for...
The drop second is new because we
Okay.
did not expect the Earth to speed up to this extent.
Well, now something to be stressed about, folks.
Yeah.
Climate change.
That's right.
Ongoing pandemics.
Yes.
And now drop seconds.
seconds.
Add that to your list of existential crises. You're welcome.
What is time?
Well, that's a hot fact, too.
There you
Vinny.
go. Thank you.
We're bringing it. We're coming in hot this
Coming
episode.
in certified hot.
Well, that's enough about us.
That's enough out
Time
of
to
us.
get to the meat and potatoes of the show.
Shall I bring in our guest, Katie?
Please do.
All right, let's say hi to Louis Colaruotolo. He watches food go bad and then jams that process up with a bunch of protophysics and math as a PhD candidate at the University of Guelph in food science. Louis often talks himself into and out of trouble on the daily, and sometimes he records it on his science communication radio show,
Oh.
We Know Some Stuff. Hello, Louis. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for welcoming me to the show.
You're welcome for welcoming you. So you're a first food
Scientist. That's cool.
Yeah, it honestly sounds like one of those made up things. Like if someone said, "What do you do?" and I'm like, "I'm a scientist," and then they're like, "What kind of science?" and I like nervously look around. And I'm like, food scientist."
That's right. The first thing you say, it's like, "Oh, I saw some food. Oh, that's me. I'm a scientist."
Yeah.
I made that. So do you want to give us some examples of like things food scientists in general work on? Making better corn? Like what is a food scientist generally working on?
Yeah, food scientists are a fun group of people because we get our grubby little fingers into every single thing that you put into your mouth. So, I always say that my job begins after the animal is dead and slaughtered, and after we've washed the dirt off of the crops.
Right.
So, we actually do some of the dirt washing, but realistically, we take the food raw products and then we transform them. So you love your Doritos and that delicious cheesy residue that comes off
yes.
onto your
We
fingers.
definitely do.
People like me, we make sure that delicious cheesy dust gets everywhere all over your house because, I don't know, that's like a trademark thing of Doritos.
It's part of the experience.
All the way to the people that put a peeled orange into a plastic container for, ease and use. So we provide all the solutions from the raw agricultural product all the way until you are eating it and
Whoa.
digesting or not digesting the lactose in dairy products.
Nice. So what in particular was your PhD working on with food science? So what are the types of questions you're looking at?
Yeah, I definitely approach food science in a slightly different way than many people do. I like to call it esoteric garbage, which I'm pretty sure that's what most PhDs are. However, I am a big fan of shelf life. So I do a lot of quality assessment and a lot of shelf life studies. So, we all know food goes bad. That's probably not shocking to anyone here or anyone listening. But the thing is that we have a lot of ways we can extend the shelf life of products. We add stuff, we package it differently. But one thing that we really don't know just yet is if the structure and the organization of the food itself contributes to the shelf life.
Whoa.
Which sounds like the esoteric garbage part. So let me get into that. It's interesting. If we think about something as bizarre as 3D printing food, if I were to 3D print the same exact formula into a hexagons or into triangles or into a grid, which one would have a longer shelf life?
Oh.
We don't have the answer to that. You don't know. I don't know.
Someone
I'm
has
trying
to
to
do the
figure out.
research.
Someone has to figure it out. So I'm a matter of taking the same exact product and
Whoa.
structuring and organizing it differently and seeing if that affects shelf life. So I'm not adding things. I'm not taking things away. I'm just saying, all right, we have these ingredients. What if we just geometrically put them into different spots?
Well, it's like, what if you had like a loaf of bread, but instead of stacking the bread slice-wise, you made them side by side, like one long sheet of paper.
Yeah,
Like
and that.
what if
that
it came
is-
as like a roll of toilet paper?
and you just like peel it
You
out?
just roll it out, yeah, and you tear off a slice of bread.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's actually genius. Cut that. That's our new product.
Patent pending.
That's right, a roll of bread.
So why would the shape matter? I mean, the thing that jumps to my mind is surface area, exposure, that sort of thing. Or is that a factor? Are there other factors you can think of?
Oh yeah, there are a lot of different things, and we're talking down on length scales that are really, really, really small.
Hmm.
We look at things on the nanometer scale. There are 1 billion nanometers in every meter, and we talk about things on the micrometer scale and on the millimeter scale. So the first thing that I chose to work with when I started this project was I investigated something called a nanostructured structure. So it was
Whoa.
these ribbons that were really, really, really thin, and they were made out of corn protein. And each ribbon was approximately 600 nanometers in diameter. So you can't see this with your eyeball.
Okay.
You just kind of have to believe in yourself and magic in order to believe that it's there. But enough of them together, it looks like something. So I look at this like really small structure. It had protein and it had fat, and I tried to see how it went bad with time.
Hmm.
The fat was inside the protein and sort of like a little core that ran throughout this ribbon. But that changed as a function of time.
Huh.
And I was like, oh, well, if that's changing, is that affecting how its quality is with
Hmm.
time? The fat started going rancid, the protein started getting all rigid, the
Right.
material sort of started to break down. So I look at this and I think to myself, well, gee, what if I just placed the fat somewhere physically different? What
Huh.
if I remade this thing and I put the fat over here, here, and here instead of there, there, and there? And now, through this type of thing, I'm able to look at it and say, oh, the organization and the structure of where I put the ingredients
Whoa.
is actually extending its shelf life.
That's fascinating. Now, I guess I have like a higher level question here. Who are the enemies of shelf life? Like
There
what?
are a number of them.
Yeah, yeah. What are they?
Yeah, shelf life is super complicated. There are so many phenomena happening at the same time. We
Hmm.
have, microbiological growth. That's all your bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
We have, the staling of carbohydrates and the oxidation of lipids. That's your fat becoming rancid. We
Hmm.
have the drying out of products. We have the re-wetting of products. We have
Hmm.
photochemicals spoiling, and we have other things fouling. The thing is that it's this concert of individual phenomena that then interact with each other to create a ridiculously entangled spider web of nonsense of your chicken breast getting yucky.
Oh man, I don't want my chicken breast to get yucky.
I'd like
Nobody
to.
does.
It'd be weird if you did.
It's true.
I'd like to circle back. So when you're experimenting with nanostructure, let's say you have this chip that has 10 proteins and 10 lipids, and you're saying where those proteins and lipids are sort of matter in terms of how long it will last in shelf life. Presumably, however, where they are will affect the texture too. Is that sort of beyond your research, or are you also looking at, okay, well, if I put the fats all on the inside, I still have the same number of proteins and fats, so I have the same product, and it lasts longer, all thumbs up. However, if Joe Blow comes around and bites into that chip, maybe it sucks. So are you looking at that aspect too, or is that sort of someone else's thing?
That would definitely be someone else's thing. However, one of the benefits of our tongue and our perception of food and flavors is that we can only discern things up to a certain length
Hmm.
scale.
Okay.
Hmm.
Right. So it is a small length scale, don't get me wrong. But when you drink, milk, that's a homogenized solution. It's got, protein and fat and it's all blended up. You can't necessarily tell that it's 3 or 4 or 5 ingredients that are kind of blended together until those droplets become so big that your tongue is like, huh, this is like that's a chunk of fat, that's a chunk of
Hmm.
protein. So at that nanoscale, I would be willing to say from my, studies that you couldn't really determine the difference. However, that difference is what dramatically affects the
Huh.
kinetics of the shelf life.
Amazing.
So that is important. But, looking at those nano scales that we're looking at, it's not going to make too much of a difference in the sensory perception of the food
That's
itself.
awesome.
That
That you
is
kind of sort
very
of have
cool.
carte blanche to do whatever you want at that scale if it preserves shelf life, because us dum-dums won't know.
Yeah, something like that.
That's really really cool. And so, well, like, what specific is there a specific food that you're working on?
Right now, we're doing a lot of fundamental research. This is like, once again, esoteric garbage.
Okay.
The stuff that people look at and they're like, why are you doing that? And like, bro, just like make Doritos taste better. But I'm not, because like I hate myself, so I go for the really hard stuff.
Right.
So I am specifically working with corn protein. I said to myself, I need to work with a protein and I need to work with a fat. So I just was like, let me go back to the basics. Let me, say all hail corn, as we do often in North America. So I was like, all right, I'll take corn protein and then I'm just taking fat. So triglycerides, the most basic unit of edible fats. So my system is simple, 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 simple. I have corn protein, I have triglycerides, fat, protein, end of story.
Wow.
Basically a Cheeto.
Basically a Cheeto. Yeah.
Well, while we're on corn, I'm going to get all my food science questions to you, Louis, while we have you.
Yeah.
What is up with corn? Why is everything made of corn nowadays? It's just easy to work with, cheap to grow, both? What's up with corn?
It's funny how government regulation really plays a big role in the food products that we see that are on the shelves. Ever since the beginning of subsidies in general, agricultural products are one of the first, largest subsidies made. So, the government fuels money towards corn producers. And then they're like, at some point, oh, we need to make a lot of corn products because now we have too much corn. Yeah, we use it for ethanol and, biofuels and things like that, but we still have an ungodly amount of corn to deal with. So then if the government is subsidizing farmers to make corn, the government is also like, oh, we need to also sell this corn. So then they start to subsidize manufacturers that also use corn. But you know what? Corn is actually kind of great because it has a lot of sugar. It also has a decent amount of protein. It's, more or less neutral in its flavor. So it could be used into a lot of things. Now, if you look into different parts of the world, they're not using corn nearly as much. However, North America is great at growing corn. We have the perfect environment for growing corn. So why not grow one of the most abundant crops that has one of the highest crop yields? Because, that's just efficiency. So you might be like, I wish there wasn't corn and everything, but corn is the most efficient and environmentally friendly thing that we can be growing for mass production of food items.
It's a good time to mention this episode is brought to you by Big Corn.
Big Corn.
Yes, Big Corn.
The Colonel Corn.
So, Louis, since you're such a pro at nanoscaly things, is there a presumably very preserved food that you think is the king of structure? That you're like, oh man, this thing is awesome for shelf life or taste or whatever metric you want to use because of its structure.
And let us remember, this is sponsored by Big Corn.
Big Corn, indeed. I will often go on tangents to the point that people need to tell me to stop talking about what I consider the major marvels of food science.
Oh, yes, let's do this.
Go.
We're talking the king of kings of food science. Some people might call them abominations. I call them miracles of science.
The Mona Lisa. What are the Mona Lisas of food science?
If I were to confidently right here on the Learn Real Good podcast, if I were to make a statement that I would not be regretting saying, I would say the Mona Lisa of all food science has to be the chicken nugget.
Yes, it should be.
Specifically the McDonald's chicken nugget or any chicken nugget product?
Mostly the McDonald's chicken nugget.
Right.
Burger King has their own, and then Wendy's, and I don't know, every other fast food has one. And then you go into the grocery store and they have all those disappointing chicken nuggets that you make in your oven.
Yeah.
And you're just like, gosh, I wish I just went to McDonald's instead.
We know that feeling.
Yes.
That's why we're laughing.
So, the chicken nugget is this beautiful work of so many different processes that have just fine-tuned the textures and the flavors and the processability of these things. And I think one of the most fascinating things, which I guess my definition of fascinating is a little bit different than most people's, is the process of deboning a chicken. Now, I don't know what exactly we're going for on this podcast and whether or not I'm trying to get people to be vegans, but I'm going to share a process of deboning that, in my opinion, is beautiful.
Let's hear it.
Deboning is beautiful. What they do is they take a chicken, they get out all the major organs, they get out most of the bones, not all the bones, and they kind of just scrape it, they clean it, it's like a carcass, and then they put this chicken, this poor chicken that was once a living being, and they blend the entire thing up with the bones and everything in there. They blend it up into a paste, and then they force that paste through these, like a colander. until the
Okay.
point that it's just the meat and the fat that are getting blended through this colander, and all the bones are being left behind.
Oh, awesome.
So you strain it. You mix
Yeah,
it and
you
strain it.
strain the chicken.
You strain a chicken carcass. All right.
If you were to read the recipe, it would be like, first blend the chicken, then strain it.
That's why we don't make them at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, more or less though. And so it's this, since you blend it so intensely, it's this fat and protein mixture that's like all mixed together so beautifully. And then that mixture is mixed with a whole bunch of other things, like some starches, some other proteins that binds
Some
everything
corn,
together.
perhaps?
Oh yeah, baby. There's corn. There's corn in there. And then those are shaped into those very familiar like shapes that are not really a shape. You ever notice chicken nugget shapes? Like, what are they?
Yeah, they have only like 6 of them. I think they
Yeah.
even have names like the mitt, the boot. They have
Yeah,
like
the boot. The boot's my favorite. Do you have a favorite chicken nugget shape?
I immediately thought of the boot shape. As soon as you said boot, I'm like, that's the one. And
That's the
I've been
one.
a vegetarian for about 20 years. I remember the chicken nugget.
The
and
boot
it was amazing.
The boot was good.
The boot.
I mean, like dino nuggets are great too, but like we're talking specifically, that McDonald's nugget right there.
So the chicken nugget, it nails it on the chicken blend. The meat is like this perfect mix of protein and lipid together in this amorphous ball. No chunks, just perfect blend.
Pure creamy protein.
homogenized like milk.
I know
Yes.
this is I know you're thinking this sounds gross, but again, I'm vegetarian and I really want a chicken nugget right now. What's up with the breading? The breading too, for me, that's what distinguishes
It's
it.
got a great texture.
Oh, doesn't it though? The breading, if you were try to make it at home, is an interesting kind of concoction. A lot of people try to do, their chicken nugget mimetics. They try to copy it. And you can go about it multiple different ways, but it's not so much a breading as it is a batter. Breading assumes that it has those hard crumbs on the outside, but the chicken nugget is a batter. If you've ever tried to make tempura, like the Japanese fried batter that they use for shrimp and okra and all different kinds of vegetables and meats, it's similar to that. So it's like this flour-based batter that is lightened with, carbonated water. But also, we need to denature a lot of the proteins that are in the flour. So a lot of times people will use alcohol as well in there. So a lot of, instead of carbonated water, we use beer. So that's like that beer batter. That's how you get the fish and chips. And it denatures
Interesting.
the proteins of the flour to make it super tender.
That's amazing.
You can even go further by adding even harder liquor, like even add a vodka to it, and it'll denature it even further. So this batter is this kind of like sloppy slurry of sorts that gets poured onto these nuggets, and then they freeze it. And by freezing it, they are able to then have individual nuggets, and then they can fry them. And it's really best to fry things from frozen because of the heat transfer. You end up cooking the outside and the inside at the same rate. Otherwise, you'll burn the outside before you cook the inside.
Holy
so
shit.
This
I'm learning
is
so
cool.
much.
I know.
yeah,
So they're
it's
cooked from frozen.
They are cooked from frozen. You ever
Flash
read those
fro-
packages?
okay.
The package always tells you cook from frozen. Do not
Okay,
defrost
okay.
first. It's a heat transfer rate kind of situation. So all the nuggets that they get into McDonald's have already been fried one time. This is a process that some people will call slacking. Other people will call it blanching. But they fry it one time and then they refreeze it. So that in the store, they're already, they're not soaking in batter and it's not sloppy mess. And then they can just drop them in and they finish them. So they're fully cooked, but they're not as golden, crispy, delicious as they could be.
Right.
And
And so-
this is why fries from frozen are best. And this is why chicken nuggets from frozen are best. So, you ever cut your own potatoes and you try to make fries and you say to yourself, wow, I love homemade fries, but you're lying to yourself. Try cutting the fries, cooking them a little bit, and then freezing them, and then cooking them again later, and you'll be surprised at the difference.
Whoa, double fried.
See, that's the sort of step that I usually skip because I'm lazy. But you're convincing me with science that there's a
Science.
reason to do these things.
Yeah.
So they actually will make a difference. It's not all psychosomatic.
Yeah, and it's not just for like storage and transport, bro. Like it actually improves the flavor.
Significantly improves
That's
the flavor.
amazing.
Crazy.
So-
Okay. We knew the chicken nugget was amazing. Now we know scientifically why it's amazing. What else would be like your silver and or bronze?
Yeah,
of
what
the
goes
food
in the
science
Museum
world?
of Food Science?
My gosh, there are so many things. There are so many things I'll say. I think the Oreo is another fascinating
yes.
one.
Let's hear this one.
You know, the Oreo itself was not actually invented by Oreo. They were actually a knockoff brand of Hydrox or
Hydrox.
whatever it was. And
Which does not sound as appetizing.
No,
it sounds like a D&D monster.
Yeah, a D&D monster that's on a
Hydrox.
diet. And it's funny because the Hydrox or the Oreo, both of them, they're vegan.
Yep.
Like what? Why is it vegan? And it never in any world had any dairy product in it. It's really this solidified fat product that is the cream. It's Hydrox.
That's how they advertise it.
Yeah. Yeah. So they Hydrox. That's the word in there and what they did to the fat to make it solid.
Huh.
They hydrogenated the fat, so it's a Hydrox.
Whoa.
And is that like one of the first hydrogenated icing type products? Is that what makes it sort of novel, or they just like nailed the formula?
I would say more so that they nailed the formula. And it's interesting in the sense because what you're doing by hydrogenating it, you're not just like changing it per se, you're structuring it. So this is the whole thing about structure all over again, is that just because of where the physical location of the fat is in that product, it has an amazing mouthfeel. It has a great flavor. It spreads beautifully. It has that crystalline-like texture. And all of these things come to the organization and the structure of the ingredient itself. You could have the same exact ingredient in a different way, but it's not going to have the same texture or the palate or the mouthfeel or the flavor because of how it's structured and organized. That's what makes like the Oreo so amazing, is this just little disc of cream in the middle, which is not cream by all means.
Right.
Now, since we're on the topic of hydrogenation, I know that when you forcibly hydrogenate fats, you can create what are called trans fats. And we know trans fats are bad. Louis, as a food scientist, do you want to sort of give us the basics as to what a trans fat is and why they're at least portrayed as bad?
Absolutely. Fat has one of the worst public relations agent in the world. We have gone through so many trends in good fats and bad fats throughout the years. There were times in which, they said that, oh, you need to be eating animal fat. Animal fat is the only thing to eat. Now, at this point, it's like animal fat is the worst thing in the world. But then at some point, they were like, oh, tropical fats are the best way to go. Tropical fats, and it was like,
Coconut oil.
And it was like, yeah, it was coconut oil. It was sexy. It was like the island fever.
You want to rub it on yourself and get a nice tan.
Yes, rub it on yourself and your chicken breast. However, everyone was like, oh, we need these tropical oils because they're low in trans fats. But the issue with a lot of tropical oils is that they actually have more saturated fat than any other thing. A coconut oil is the most saturated fat of any edible oil. And we know saturated fat to be bad. So saturated fat means it's solid at room temperature. And it really is the one that clogs your arteries.
Right.
But tropical fat, it comes from a fruit. How can it be saturated? Well, it is. So the thing is that in baked products and goods, we want things that are saturated. We want the butters that, are solid at room temperature, and then they melt and they create that amazing texture in your mouth. So we want saturated fats. However, if we're going to create saturated fats in our laboratory and in our kitchens, we do a process called hydrogenation. And this is a pretty good process. However, in the process of making more saturated fat, we tend to create things that are called trans fats. The thing is that if you hydrogenate enough, if you hydrogenate to 100%, you break out all those kinks and you have no more trans fats. And that's good. Unfortunately, that's not always the product that we want. So we're constantly looking for different ways in order to make these solid fat products without introducing trans fats. Now, the issue, of course, with trans fats is that they are naturally found in animal products. Butter has trans fat, beef tallow has trans fat, and then it's less popular in fruit and vegetable products. Soybean oil has no trans fats, and cottonseed oil has no trans fats. So those are liquids, though. We want solids, but we don't want trans fats. So we, are constantly going, oh, well, palm kernel oil is really nice, terrible for the environment, but it doesn't have as many trans fats, and it's nice and solid. So it's kind of this balance. We don't want trans fats, but we want solids.
Yeah.
We want healthier fats, but we don't like the texture of healthier fats. And ultimately, it's this battle of what is hot right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all, it feels like the sugar had the good rap and now has the bad rap. And so like there's always this like kind of tension between, should I be getting my calories from fats? Should I be getting my calories from sugar? Is there anything good for me out there?
Yeah, there is nothing good for you out there. Just consume what makes you happy, and then die at the ripe age of 86.
We're just gonna cry into our bags of Doritos
And chicken
there
nuggets.
And chicken nuggets.
Nice.
a
They
good way
do
to
use
go.
a lot of solid fats in Doritos. I'm just saying.
And corn.
Oh yeah.
Big corn.
Oh yeah. Big corn.
So let's also talk about your science communication radio show. Like,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan, just humongous fan of not doing the things that I'm paid to do. Passion, I would actually say about that. So I am constantly looking for things to, avoid my responsibilities, but avoid my responsibilities in a way in which my advisor can only get mildly upset with me.
Good.
So there's a
The
fine
magic
balance. Yes,
Yeah.
it really is. And I love talking. I don't know if you've noticed up until this point. I think my voice sounds so good.
Agreed.
Buttery smooth. some
It's
would say.
buttery, like a nice trans fat. Oh, it's delicious. And so I really love talking, and I think that unfortunately science is pretty poorly communicated.
Agreed.
I mean, I talk to scientists all day, and boy, are they just the worst. In all credit, scientists are taught and trained to think and talk and communicate information in a way that is just straight up not accessible to the public.
Yeah.
And not no fault to their own necessarily, because we're told that we have to speak, in exact terms. Otherwise, there's going to be that guy in the conference that stands up and yells at you,
Yep.
which happens.
Absolutely.
Someone will call you out and say, like, I use this term instead of this term, and this is why you're wrong, and you should hate yourself, and you should go home and cry. And you do. You usually do.
Go home and cry. We do a lot of crying.
A lot of crying. It's therapeutic. So the thing is that the way that we're taught communication is really, really, really poor. It may be good for our specific group of people that we're talking to, and it may be good for this highly educated group. But then when it comes to talking to someone even in a different science, it's like you're speaking a foreign language.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So, I think to myself, what if it is possible, and we do know it's possible, if we could just talk more candidly about science? If we could have conversations like we're having right now about the marvels of chicken nuggets with a heavy science backhand, we could potentially increase science literacy among everyone. A conversation like this is interesting to a biologist as it is to a comedian. So we're able to achieve sort of a balance in communicating while not being boring and dry like those old documentary sort of style shows, which I kind of love, I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, if you have Nova, you got a human dinosaur hybrid. That's definitely going to catch someone's attention.
It certainly is romantically and otherwise.
For some.
But it's very true. Like when you, as a scientist, the only people you generally talk to are other scientists in your own field, and so you get caught up in jargon and being like technically accurate and precise, and but it also becomes very opaque, like completely impenetrable. What you're saying to the average layperson who's just like, I don't know what you're saying. But there's so much science in the world, and the world we live in is based so much on science that people just go around being like, I don't know how anything works. It's all super impenetrable to me. And then it's really easy to cause misinformation and fear what we don't know and don't understand. And I think it's it falls onto the scientists to like, hey, let's get our act together and speak more plainly.
I think a big root of the problem, I think, is that when we introduce science to students, is we say that one of the goals of science is that it's objective.
To find the truth.
That there is this one truth, and you, as a subjective, error-ridden human, you must be stripped from the work that you're doing for your science to be good. And I think that that's impossible because we are humans. We do make mistakes. We do have biases. We are subjective. And therefore, the work that we do is
inherently subjective.
And I think that if we were to embrace that a bit more, to allow the human element in, I think it would remove some of those barriers between science and non-scientists.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's a difficult thing to do. You know, I not that I've received direct pushback from anyone, you know, doing the radio show that I do, which is it's hosted on a local, you know, radio channel. So I get that broadcasted, and then I guess people who own radios, I guess they're called, they listen to it. Of course, you know, it's streamable online, yada yada yada. But the thing is that I've gotten a little bit of pushback originally when I was, you know, pitching this idea, because they were like, "Well, that's not scientific enough," and I'm over here like, what if it is scientific enough?
Yeah, absolutely.
What if your perception of scientific enough is warped by what you've been told for years and years and years and years, and you learned from the people who learned from the people who learned from the people who was only the elitist of the elite were scientists. And unfortunately, a lot of people have this extreme crippling fear of sounding like they don't know what they're talking about.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Part of the problem, too, is the people that you know who talk about science are either scientists who generally aren't great communicators and are used to talking about what they do to their peers, and it becomes very impenetrable, or science journalism, which is difficult to do because you need a science background to just even interpret what the new stuff that's coming out. I've seen so many media releases and newspaper articles and online articles about science news that straight up misinterprets what a paper is saying or what a scientist is talking about, and then the editor gets a hold of the article and puts this like sensational headline on it that is even more misleading, and it becomes really, really difficult to accurately and honestly communicate what science is happening in the world around us. And then there's that like, oh well, there's something wrong here, and then becomes like this circle of mistrust.
Yeah, and it's kind of a vicious sort of circle. So you need people that are highly educated in order to interpret things that are highly coded in, you know, difficult to understand things. But then you get these highly educated people that have spent their entire lives trying to refine their ability to understand these things, that you sort of lose the ability to communicate these things in time. You know, I'll catch myself doing it all the time. I'll assume people know when I, you know, talk about certain things that in reality, a lot of people don't know that. So even if I like to think that I can speak about science candidly, it's still really difficult. I still have to constantly check myself to say like, oh, maybe that's not the best way to approach it. And realistically, do I, you know, focus on doing the science, or do I focus on communicating the science? Because it's hard, it's time consuming, and it's a lot of mental work to do both.
Yeah.
100%.
So, you know, I have this little, you know, radio show, and I named it We Know Some Stuff. Because the reality is, you know, we only know some stuff. We don't know all the stuff, but we do know some stuff.
True.
I love the name of your show, and your show is fantastic. Our listeners, I think, will definitely appreciate it.
Yeah.
I feel like we're really spiritual cousins in the podcast world.
Yeah, and it, you know, I also, as you're doing, I'm trying to highlight the fact that there's a human being doing the science behind it.
Right.
Because, you know, we hear so much about, you know, this poet's life, and we know all about Ernest Hemingway's, you know, alcoholism and how that affected all of those things, and Vincent van Gogh's Blue period. We all hear about how their lives intersect with their artwork and their poetry and their writings. But we don't often hear about the intersect between the Nobel Prize winning scientist and how their things turned out. You know, only recently are we learning more things about Madame Curie's, you know, how she was like deeply, deeply depressed after her husband was ran over by a horse-drawn cart.
Yes.
So, like, you know, it's these things that you wonder, yeah, you could paint a beautiful painting because you're depressed, but do we ever wonder that maybe that depression is what caused her to make so many advances in the field of radioisotopes and radiology? Is it possible that her emotional and personal life was big drivers on her ability to succeed in science? So it's examining those kinds of things. We're humans. We're doing a human job. That is science. And the more that we get people to understand that there's a human being behind it, the more we understand, one, how difficult it is, because God, I'm a human being that can like barely take care of myself, but I'm also still trying to produce this science.
Right.
So it's this intersect between I'm a real person and my biases are affecting the science itself.
I mean, we couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
We could talk about this one all day.
That's true.
But while we're talking about the human side of science, Louis, you're a human, right? Confirmed?
Last time I checked.
What were you like as a kid? Were you always curious? Were you a science nerdy kid? Like, how did you get where you are now?
You know, I honestly don't know myself. I was not a science nerdy kid.
Okay.
I think if I look back into my, yearbooks like in elementary school and they say like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm pretty sure it was like comedy movie star. Was my big one. That hasn't panned out yet, but I feel like maybe tomorrow.
Still early.
Yeah, still early. That, and I also wanted to be a teacher, but I always wanted to teach the grade that I was, because I always thought that was the most interesting grade.
How cool would it be if that was how it worked? You had your peers teaching you. Everybody gets a day.
I just thought it was the coolest. So then, high school rolled around, and I opted out of science. I was able to like do more art and stuff like that, so that's what I did. So I opted straight out of science, and I, was at that point of graduating, and I was like, I'm not going to university. That's not for me. But my parents were like, hey, no, you have to, otherwise, consequences. So I went to trade school. Because they were like, you have to do something. We're not going to let you just work at your part-time job at your grocery store that I was working at. So I went to trade school, and I went for culinary arts, and I loved it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And at that point, I said to myself, well, I have this culinary arts knowledge. I feel that I need to apply it. I stumbled across food science, and now I'm just like a full bona fide food nerd.
Very cool.
De-bona-fide.
Yeah. Mechanically de-bona-fide food nerd. That's good.
Does your culinary arts background, like, at all seep into your work?
I think it does from a practical standpoint. Sometimes I'll understand more. I learn why something's done in culinary.
Yeah.
Because of the hard science behind it. But you know what? I'll tell you the truth. Food scientists that I've met, some of them are the worst cooks I've ever met in my entire life. They use too much science, and I'm like, bro, it's just a hamburger. Like, calm down. That's not going to help.
Overthink it.
Yeah. They're more focused on the industrial process.
Yeah, right. So it's funny because there's that intersect between, a thing that I love to do, and I will never, ever, ever regret going to trade school. That was the best thing I needed at that moment, and it helped me understand where I am. But by no means in my childhood was I like the little dork with a microscope. That wasn't me. So I stumbled upon it, and I fell in love with it. So you don't have to be, the little glasses wearing microscope, or what is it called? Magnifying glass, running around in the woods looking at things to end up in science.
Absolutely
For me, it
not.
was like I don't want to call it late in life because I was like, 20 years old? Well, I guess that is late in life considerably, given that I'm only 29. But I had this, moment that it was like, this is interesting to me. Although it's not something that I'm necessarily trained into, I ended up loving it. And here I am now.
That's a great message.
And that's why we asked this question, because there are so many paths. Like, the idea that you go to school year after year, you get, super high grades, and you have to be XYZ, this kind of stereotype of the path to science, where the idea of the path to science is you become a doctor or a physicist or whatever. There's so many different paths into science and out of it too. Like, how many kids do think that food science is a thing that they can do? Probably zero. They don't even know it's a field of study. And so there's so many paths in and out of science that I think it's just fascinating to hear everybody's individual story on their relationship with it. And then yours is no exception.
Yeah. It's funny. We all take these different paths, and we all end up in different places, and I'm still at that point where I have to decide what I really want to do when I'm done. I got like 1 year left to make that decision, but I'll maybe figure it out. I like to think, fingers crossed. So I don't really even know where it'll take me.
Yeah, that is what we were going to ask you. So maybe the answer is you don't know. Do you know if you want to do academic? Do you want to do research? Do you want to become a comedian?
Great, all of them. No, realistically, I love public media. I think public media is just one of the best institutions on this planet. I grew up watching Mr. Rogers. He's the only reason that I am capable of empathy. I think Julia Childs is one of my favorite celebrities of all times. You got your Carl Sagans and your Bob Rosses. So I think that public education is one of the most beautiful institutions. It's like the purest form of rebellion that exists. And I would love to communicate in a way that's accessible to everyone. So I might try to take it from a science communication aspect. At the same time, I'd love to make more than $21,000 a year. So we'll see what happens. Maybe I'll do that for a little bit. Yeah, but the thing is that I have a lot of weird, unique skills that I could apply to the food industry. And I guess I will just, as a PhD, sometimes you don't have the ability to make as many decisions when you're trained in such a narrow field. Sometimes you have to take what is available. So we'll see. But I would like to end up in some sort of communication-like field in the long run.
Well, we have no doubt that you would succeed in that. You're a fantastic science communicator. You really explain some really complicated things in a very fun, exciting way.
If I needed someone to run a telethon to raise funds during a Nova, I know who I'm talking to.
Dinosaur Man.
And you,
Louis.
And Louis, the co-hosts.
That'd be an honor. That would truly be an honor.
Well, Louis, I wish we could talk to you all day because you have really cool stuff and you talk about it good. We learned real good today. Thank you so much for your time. Best of luck in the future. And listeners, listen to We Know Some Stuff because it's awesome.
Yeah, you can find that on the internet.
It's all over the internet. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks. Bye, Louis. Oh my gosh, that was so cool.
Very cool.
This has been a hot episode.
This was
two hot facts and a really great guest.
I'm going to say this whole episode is certified hot. It was a really great conversation.
Oh, man. See, there you have it, folks. If you needed to be convinced of the value of being a effective science communicator, check out how well all that cool food stuff was explained.
I love chicken nuggets.
I'm never going to think of frozen fries the same way again.
I'm going to go out right after this. I'm going to get some fries, some chicken nuggets, maybe a milkshake, and some Hydrox.
I'm going to admit something. Sometimes when I buy frozen fries, I think in my brilliant brain, I'm not going to put them in the freezer if I'm going to cook them tonight. I'm going to stick them in the fridge because
you want them
they'll
to
cook
thaw
faster. Is that not?
No.
I always assume the cook from Frozen is like, don't fret, home chef. You can cook this from Frozen. Not that it would be better that way.
It's a heat transfer issue.
I understand now. I won't be fooled again.
Won't be fooled again.
Well, that's our episode.
I loved your fact today. Milk.
Oh, yeah. We learned so much. We learned about the history of lactase persistence. We learned about drop seconds. And leap seconds.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Who knew?
Something else to be worried about.
Well, now we do. And now you do too, listeners.
Okay. Well, thank you, Louis. And Vinny, send everyone out on our socials.
If you want to find us on social media, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at LRG Pod. That's LRG Pod on all of those social media. And if you would like to be a guest and you're a grad student in the STEM field, why don't you send us an email at learnrealgoodpodcast@gmail.com. That's learnrealgoodpodcast@gmail.com. Send us some email and we'd love to have you on.
And if you are a fellow learner and you like the show, please take a second to review our show and give it a 5-star review if you liked it. If you didn't, keep your mouth shut.
Even if you didn't like it, give it a 5-star review.
If you're willing.
Just fudge the numbers. This is not science.
Hey.
This is algorithm manipulation.
There you have it.
That's
All right.
us.
Well, that's it for Learn Real Good. See you next week.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.